Archival project, we focused on the disparity in gender types, specifically during World War II, which lasted from 1939 to 1945. The U.S. Officially joined the war on December 7th of 1942 after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. By late 1942, all men aged 18 to 64 were required to register for the draft, although it was aimed at those under 38. Approximately 16.1 million Americans participated in the war. While men were being sent off to war, women stayed on the home front and took over the traditional male jobs of the time, while also volunteering for war-related organizations and maintaining the household. While their contribution and positions were seen as temporary in the eyes of the men off at war, the women saw it differently.
Pulp fiction. During the time period between World War I and World War II, science fiction was at an all-time high because of the current state of living conditions since the Great Depression just happened, World War I just ended, and they're about to enter another world war. People turned to science fiction as an outlet to escape reality. As a result of the science fiction boom, as well as discounted postage was available for magazines, pulp fiction magazines arose. They became very successful, with the most popular issues selling over 1 million copies. Science fiction, its main purpose is to provide unique alternatives to reality, often glorified versions of reality. By these conservative gender stereotypes being presented in science fiction, it gave a false perception that this conservative gender role was ideal for society.
Okay, so the archival text that we studied was the Astounding Stories series in the 1940s. And so why did we study the Astounding Stories? But we studied the Astounding Stories because, just a little brief history about the Astounding Stories. It was inspired from the Amazing Stories, which is created by Hugo Gernsback, and it kind of, the Astounding Stories kind of pulled away from the extrapolative possibilities. So what that means is that it's less futuristic than other science fiction magazines. And what that does is that kind of sets the setting of the stories that were in the Astounding Stories. It sets that more into the time period of then, which was the 1940s, which more correlates with the time period. And the Astounding Stories were also very popular during this time because of this, and it was described as interesting and exciting. It still held some scientific truth.
So between the ages of 1938 to 1946, science fiction was considered at its golden age. Like Danielle said, many people got a lot of their news both from mainstream media, but also from science fiction. Along with this news, however, came propaganda, like military, political, and social propaganda that cannot be overlooked. For our topic, we chose to focus on the gender stereotypes, which in today's eyes may be seen as derogatory and blatant. However, back then, it was widely considered the norm for these types of stereotypes to be projected through media and science fiction. Specifically, we're going to talk about how science fiction's conservative view of gender roles coincided with mainstream media, which both overshadowed and refuted progressive social movements at the time. So this is an article written by one of the writers, or the authors of Astounding Science Fiction, and as you can see by the title, super conservative. He considers science fiction to be a very conservative take on current events during the time. So in the beginning of his article, he addresses the fact that many people at the time thought that science fiction was just for like wild-eyed enthusiasts of fiction rather than the general man, where he claims that this is not the case for Astounding Science Fiction. Because of their use of real-world events and reality at the time, they actually were able to get a wider audience of people, making them one of the most successful science fiction magazines at the time. For them, it was considered conservative to look 50 years into the future. However, if you take this statement on the contrary, you can see that if 50 years in the future is considered conservative, then their articles about gender stereotyping and their advertisements will also be not just considered conservative, but will also be considered ordinary. This causes a dangerous, they walk a very dangerous line between science fiction and reality, as a lot of their claims are able to be hidden under the title of science fiction if someone's to get offended by it, but they influence many of the readers subconsciously and intentionally in other articles and other advertisements with their stereotypical views on gender.
In order to stay relevant to the current time period, magazines often overshadowed other controversial issues for the most important at the time. So one major thing we noticed when studying Astounding Stories was during the 1930s, the covers often depicted women and portrayed them very sexually, as you can see in the first two images. But once the 1940s started, there were no images of women. It was solely focused on men, and these men were often shown wearing red, which could have symbolized communism and the Soviet Union at the time.
The Astounding series use advertisements to bridge the gap between purely fictional stories and true reality. And they use this to sell ideas using idealistic realities. The magazine targeted middle to upper class white males, and because of this, the advertisements appealed to the anxieties of the situation and the enforced gender roles. And as you can see in this left advertisement, the case of the crying wife already shows how society views women. And in this ad, the wife is crying because her dreams of buying a car and building a new home are not becoming a reality, and it becomes the man's job to get a better job and thus provide for his wife. And in the ad to the right, this pen is aimed towards women at home to write to their husbands that are at war to, quote, cheer them up. And these are two clear examples of what women's roles were at that time.
Okay, so here is an example of women in the workplace. This is a story, Line to Tomorrow by Louis Paget. It's a story, and basically the basic plot summary is a man who works for an advertisement company discovers that a phone at his office, basically where he can time travel through it. And there's a female character in the story who also works at the same advertisement company, and basically her role is described as not adequate. She's not that great at her job. She can't keep up with the other people in her office who are primarily men. And this just kind of shows that women did not belong into the workplace, and that this belief was widely held.
In this ad, the magazine completely diminishes the meaning and value that the Red Cross had. The Red Cross was a chief provider of relief supplies for civilian victims and combat casualties. On the home front, millions of volunteers provided aid and comfort for members of the armed forces as well as their families. And in this magazine, the ad diminishes the value of those people who volunteered to just smiling, wholesome American girls, and claimed that the only purpose that Red Cross volunteers had was to perform the simple, homey act of GI sew on buttons. And this was far from the reality of what the Red Cross actually accomplished, one of which was the blood donor service. By the end of the war, they had received donations from 6.7 million people and donated 13 million pints of blood at 35 fixed donor centers and 63 mobile units. So this advertisement is obviously a very wrong representation of the value of the Red Cross.
Okay, so these are two ads. Ever Ready batteries are often common advertisement you will find in the back cover of the Astounding Science Fiction series. And this just shows how what the role of women was. It shows the sexual objectification of women and basically how they're objects to men, and basically their whole role as a woman is to please the man. And if you go to the next slide, here is a graph from an article published in the Psychology Journal that shows that sexual objectification experience actually leads to self-objectification, which then in turn kind of tells women to lower their own self-worth as well, and kind of keeps creating this cycle of women being lesser than men.
In the 1944 edition of Astounding Series, a story that enforced these gender stereotypes was There Shall Be Darkness by C.L. Moore. And in the story, it is about the decay of the last civilizations in the solar system and about a commander who has to return to Earth to defend his homelands against these, quote, barbarians. And in this story, the one woman is subservient to the commander as she's demanded to get a drink for him. And she's described as the satin that she walks on and the cloud of perfume that circles her. But not only are there gender stereotypes for women, but men as well, as the commander is described as barrel-chested and thick through the shoulders.
Okay. This is an advertisement from Astounding Science Fiction from the November issue of 1945. And this advertisement basically is a questionnaire. And it's asking series of questions like, does your husband or wife spend too much money? Does your husband or wife do this? And so on. And if you look to the right picture, it kind of shows how you score. And it's basically comparing men and women roles and saying, if your husband has a low score, then just give him a talking to. But if your woman has a low score, if your wife has a low score, then you need to sing her. And this just kind of shows what is expected from women, and women are expected to be in line all the time, whereas men can do whatever they want.
So on the other hand, advertisements are not only derogatory towards women, but usually portrayed an unattainable, idealistic man. As you can see in these three pictures, the one on the left is of a man, clean-shaven, strong jawline, perfect hair, and he's kind of in the spotlight with the other 5 or 6 distorted faces in the shadow, kind of symbolizing that if you can't match this ideal view, you're going to be put in the shadows. You're not going to be able to get kind of this praise that you deserve. And without fail, one of the most common advertisements on the first full page was a Listerine advertisement. This one I actually found pretty shocking. In the caption at the top, it says, "Men are flocking to our non-hokum lather because our ads appeal to their intelligence." And later on, they claim that this is a sensible ad rather than something that's meant to be taken as a joke. So it's clear to people reading this that it's meant for a man to be intelligent, to be strong, to be smart, and that's just what defines a man. These idealistic views cause a lot of men to not only strive to be this person, which is usually unattainable, as you see by kind of like the Superman figure with the kind of defined six-pack and pecs and everything that's usually unattainable. They're not only striving to do this, but when they do not achieve this goal, they're put down and they're claimed to not fulfill the full duty of a man.
In addition to our archival sources, we also read an academic journal that was about the image of men that arose during the World War. So before the World War in the 1930s, the Great Depression happened, which degraded men's masculinity, especially in the middle class, because they could no longer financially provide for their families. So during the World War II, it provided a new medium for men to regain their masculinity, and advertisers and magazines exploited this completely. By presenting an opportunity for men to pursue such ideal nature, magazines advertised for such an ideal man that was unobtainable again, because the men who went off to war were seen as such an ideal hero, but the men who didn't, their masculinities were degraded even more than prior to the war, since they weren't fighting for our country and they stayed back. So advertisers used this lack of confidence that those men had to gain, they used it to exploit them and gain their attention. So here's two examples of advertisements that completely exploited it during World War II. They show men that were completely six-pack, basically naked, and the advertisement said, "I can make you a new man, here's the kind of men I built," basically saying through them you can become a new person who is ideal and fits these social norms. And here's two more advertisements for men. These were based more on the war. So it basically, these advertisements both were for a school. So they said, if you're not fighting for our country, you may as well get an education, and by doing so, train men in industry march shoulder to shoulder with America's armed forces. But if you don't get an education, you're just a slacker.
So a key difference at this time were, as you see, many advertisements both degraded women and put an unattainable, highly idealistic view that men should strive to achieve. But one of them, being the women's advertisements, had kind of a surge of a movement, which later became the women's rights movement, where women could protest these types of ads and actually refute to coincide with what was being presented to them. And actually, it's kind of ironic because Rosie the Riveter, the famous like women can do it, like we can do it, we're just as strong as men are, was actually used as a propaganda poster to get women into the workforce and to help persuade them to get into the workforce. This was later turned into a key figure in the women's rights movement. However, men did not have such a movement. So for men, it was a united, universal kind of almost truth at this time that they had to strive for this idealistic view. This caused many men, when they came back from war, to force women, whether they liked it or not, out of jobs because there is no other place for them to escape to. They couldn't simply be a stay-at-home man, as they did not have the freedom or the liberty to protest such movements. Its widespread acknowledgement was never judged or never refuted in both war times, in science fiction, and in mainstream media. And they didn't even have an underlying protest or rebellion to join forces with them to protest such advertisements.
According to an article in the Journal of Economic History called The Working Class Rosies, the withdrawal of women from the workplace was due to a resumption of personal preference or a response to the pressure of a feminine ideology. This retrenchment occurred in spite of evidence that women's productivity was as high as men's. So even after the war, women realized that they were just as capable as men were in their jobs. And these pressures of a feminine ideology is that women would stay at home, take care of the family, take care of the house, and men would provide the money. So the evidence that they were just as capable provided an underlying current for the movements that would come in the future.
So, as Anna was saying, the tensions at this point were at an all-time high as articles had consistently been saying women should work in the factories and support men during war. However, it seemed to instantaneously flip to the reverse once men came back from war. At this point, women had, middle-class women specifically, had gotten a taste of like the workforce, as many lower-class women were already in the workforce, and this is a common misconception that women were not working at the time. A lot of them were working, and now in 1945, almost a third of the workforce was just women. And women not only worked in the factories, but they actually went to war in sections of the Army, of the Navy, in a section called WAVE, and became nurses in the Red Cross, which was completely undermined by a lot of the advertisements seen in these magazines and newspapers. One of the key issues was because of the constant reminder that women should leave work for a man who's superior and who can do the job more efficiently, which was completely disproven by women like physically during the war, as they proved themselves to be able to do not only the job that men can do, but supersede a lot of the positions that men were accountable for before the war. This caused, okay, we have one more slide.
Okay, finish.
Yeah, so this caused a lot of tension between the two, between mainstream media and the actual reality of the war, causing a gridlock in social progression.
So quickly to conclude, the progressive movements were on the rise, which led to the decline in science fiction. Since science fiction maintained an outdated conservative view of gender, people progressed beyond that and no longer turned science fiction, and progressive movements became more prominent. Conservative gender roles, stereotypes were broken, and science fiction no longer reflected the current